Hi, Bobby. Good afternoon. How are you doing today?
I am so good. It's so good to be with you, Maggie.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. And I wanted to set up this podcast today because it is the National Crime Victim Rights Week. And so I wanted to take advantage and to chat with you in depth about this topic.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it's actually the 40th anniversary of National Crime Victims' Rights Week. So, um, yeah, I'm excited to talk to you.
40 years. Wow.
Yeah,
So maybe we can just start with some introductions. Tell people who you are, where you work, what your role is.
sure. Thanks. I'm Bobby Holtberg, and I am the executive director at the Minnesota Alliance on Crime, also known as MAC. I have been at MAC for about 5 years, a little over 5 years as the executive director. And we are a membership coalition. We have just under 100 member programs statewide throughout Minnesota, and they all provide direct services to crime victims in some way. MAC's primary role is to provide training and technical assistance and networking opportunities for our member programs and stakeholders. And then we also do a lot of public policy work and certainly monitor legislation and weigh in on legislation that we think would either have a positive or a negative impact on crime victims and the programs that provide services to them. So that's kind of in a nutshell what MAC is and what we do. But we certainly try to support our member programs in any way that we can.
That's great. Thank you for explaining about MAC and its role. And you're the executive director. And how long have you been in that role at MAC?
I came here in January of 2016, so it was 5 years this past January. I guess I need to stop saying that I'm new.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So it's been quite a time of growth for us in the past 5 years.
Yes, definitely. And I've also worked at Think Self for almost 5 years. And it's hard to believe.
I know. I know. I don't know if you are like me, but I keep wanting to say I'm relatively new, but I can't say that anymore.
Yeah, no, not so much. So for this week, National Crime Victim Rights Week,
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you'd be willing to explain a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I wrote some notes here. So if I look down, it's because I just want to make sure I don't forget anything. In 1981, then President Ronald Reagan designated this week, a week it tends to be the third week in April, as National Crime Victims' Rights Week. And what it is a time to kind of renew our commitment to serving all victims of crime, to celebrate the victories that we have had in the crime victim services field. Especially, it's a time where at a national level, they honor folks who have gone above and beyond in their work with crime victims. And we also take time during this week to remember crime victims and survivors. This year's theme is support victims, build trust, and engage communities. And I think it's very appropriate because in this last year of COVID, while we've been isolated from one another, it has also, I think, made us realize how interdependent we are on one another as service providers and wanting to make sure we are connecting. And only through our connections and our relationships and our joint work can we make sure that crime victims, all crime victims, can be comprehensively supported and have access to support and services. According to the last Bureau of Justice, I guess from 2019, the statistics were that 1.2 million people are victims of violent crime in America. And I think, having done this work for a long time, that is only those who reported. There are many, many more victims of crime who, for so many different reasons, choose to not report to law enforcement or to advocacy or to really anybody. So while some may see that 1.2 million number and think that it's high, I usually say I think that's just, the tip of the iceberg, what we can see. And there is so much more below. So many people who we don't see and whose names we don't know because they don't feel safe or for whatever reason don't report their crimes. Yeah, so I
That's
would
right.
say, MAC is really working hard, especially during this week, to highlight some of the work that we do with our partners to strengthen services and also to look at what rights in Minnesota we could really strengthen and how could that happen. So we've done a number of trainings this week with the Crime Victim Justice Unit, which is part of the Office of Justice Program, which is part of the Department of Public Safety, because they really are the entity that can push forward public policy and legislation to strengthen funding for services and also strengthen our statutory scheme that affords victims their rights.
That's exactly right. Wow. I was just thinking about that number, 1.2 million. I mean, and that number being just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we are actually tomorrow we're doing a roundtable, and I am going to host a table topic on equitable access. And so we're going to talk about, what are some of the barriers that exist? And then how, as we work towards creating more equitable access to both the criminal legal system, but also the advocacy system. How are we going to measure, when we are achieving success in that area? Because I think it's one thing to work on it, but we also have to think, how are we going to know that we're making progress in that area? So I'm excited for that conversation tomorrow.
That's very cool, Bobby. Thank you so much for sharing. Really, every person that experiences crime, any crime victim's experience is going to be their own. And they are the decision makers in terms of what they want. It's not a one size fits all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But most of our systems are created where they want it to be a one size fits all.
Right. Now, I'm hoping to ask you a question. What's the first thing a person should do if they become a victim of crime?
Um, Boy, I think again, like you just said, it's very different for each individual. There are a lot of communities where I'll just say in my community as a white heterosexual woman, I don't have a fear of picking up the phone and calling the police or going to report, that I was a victim of crime. So, but that's not the reality for many communities and many individuals. So I think if you are a victim of crime, I hope there is someone in your circle of support that you can reach out to and talk to. And to that person, I would say, if somebody comes to you and says that they have been a victim of crime, I hope that you believe them and validate their feelings about what they have experienced. And then if you are aware of supports and services, certainly share that with, whomever is sharing with you. um, I think it's always really important for folks in the community to just know what are the supports and services in our community. There are a lot of really great community-based programs. So if somebody isn't wanting to report the crime to law enforcement, that doesn't mean that they still can't access support and services through the community. I think if somebody is wanting to report to law enforcement, I would hope that as a friend, as a person who cares about this person, that you would support them through that process. Because it usually isn't as simple as just making the report and then being done. That kind of now creates it's the start of a whole chain reaction of events. And most crime victims um, aren't really aware of that whole series of events now that will kind of happen, whether they want to or not, just by simply making that report. So I always think if it's possible, I mean, certainly if it's a serious injury, if it's something like that, you need to seek medical attention, that kind of thing. So you want to always make sure that they're physically safe. Then I think the next priority is emotional safety, and then getting them connected to the correct or the most helpful uh, supports and resources. And I think, again, we need to be really aware that not all community resources are appropriate for all people. And again, it's up to the person who has experienced the victimization to decide what they want to do. I mean, certainly as a supporting person in their life, we can offer our support, tell them what we know about resources available. But at the end of the day, they are the experts in their life, and we need to support whatever decision they make.
Yes, you're definitely right there. Um, I wanted to mention that there are a lot of support services available. Um, I'm curious if there are alternatives to calling 911 or law enforcement. If someone's not comfortable doing that, what are some other alternative pathways that people can access?
So I want to understand your question, Maggie. Are you talking about if they want to report to the system, but they don't want to report to law enforcement?
Or let's say a person is looking for more support, but they don't want to call the police. Are there alternatives for them?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think 211 is a great option for folks to just understand and get an idea of what support and resources are available for them locally. So there might be things that are very local for them in their city or town. There are also, community-based, we call them community-based programs because they're not a part of a system, of a criminal legal system, like victim witness advocates. Those are advocates that work with victims or people who have witnessed a crime, and they have a case moving through the system. So a charge has been made, and they're working through that process. For other folks, there are community-based programs that exist both in their community and also kind of regionally. So I think it's to find that. Also, there are a lot of other hotline numbers. In Minnesota, we have the day one. So it used to be that day one was really only about shelter for domestic violence victims. And now they have really branched out, and they do both phone advocacy, text line advocacy for domestic violence, sexual assault, and victims of general crime. So I think that in Minnesota is a huge resource for folks, especially for folks in communities that either are underserved, there just aren't services there, or they don't feel comfortable for whatever reason and believe that they can meet the needs, the maybe the specific needs that they have. So I think day one is a great entry point because they also have relationships and connections to all the other supports and resources.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Bobby. That's completely right. So you said that Minnesota, a local area can call 211. Does that apply on a national level?
I think in most communities that have a United Way, 211 is that connection. That's kind of been their campaign. And I believe that almost all states have, if you don't have United Way in your community, you have a statewide kind of United Way network. And that you should be able to dial 91 or sorry 211 211, and that takes you to that hotline. Somebody answers on the other end and will ask you some questions to help, identify the immediate need and then the resources that would be best able to meet that immediate need, and then also more long term.
Thank you, Bobby. We're going to put all of those numbers and information at the end of this podcast. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can.
That's great. That's great. There also are other national hotline numbers, and I didn't come prepared to give those to you, but I can certainly get those to you. There's a national domestic violence hotline, and basically how that works is you would call that hotline number, but actually it's going to be answered. Your call will automatically be routed to the program that is closest to the area code from which you are calling.
Oh, how great.
Yeah.
That's great to know.
Yeah.
Well, Bobby, again, thank you so much for joining me today.
Anytime, Maggie. This has been so fun. I am so excited about the relationship that Mac has been able to forge with Think Self. We just adore you guys and the work that you all do, and so happy that you're a part of the Mac family as a member program, and so happy to work with you.
Yes, you too. Thank you. And I also want to recognize that those who have experienced crime or are victims of crime, you're not alone. There's always resources and people that you can contact.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Maggie.
All right. Well, thank you, Bobby. It was nice to see you today.
So good to see you. Have a good rest of the day.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Bye.